You don't build a list of enemies like this by accident. You build it by leaving a trail of shocked ex-friends, burned bridges, and people who swear they saw the real you before the crown ever did. Before the tiaras, before the palace gates, before the world split into Team Meghan and Team Absolutely Not, there were whispers. Whispers that her rise wasn't luck, wasn't love, wasn't fairy tale destiny, but strategy. Calculated moves, carefully chosen rooms, carefully chosen people. And long before most of America learned her name, a few voices were already side-eyeing the climb. One of the earliest? A comedian who didn't buy the innocent outsider narrative for a second. When old photos resurfaced from the briefcase holding game show days, the captions weren't nostalgic, they were sharp. The implication hit hard: this wasn't random fame, this was a plan in motion. At the time, critics were dismissed as bitter or jealous. But years later, when biographer Tom Bauer began laying out timelines, social connections, and career pivots, some people started saying those early jokes didn't look like jokes anymore. They looked like foreshadowing. As her profile grew, so did the backlash, especially from media personalities who saw contradictions where supporters saw courage. One of the loudest critics made a career out of blunt opinions and didn't hesitate to aim straight at the Duchess. The core accusation? You can't say you want privacy while signing blockbuster media deals, sitting for global interviews, and producing tell-all content. To her critics, that wasn't survival, that was branding. The tone of the criticism was harsh, sometimes brutal, and often deeply polarizing. Supporters called it misogyny, racism, cruelty. Critics called it accountability. And right in the middle of that battlefield was Meghan, either a woman standing up to an ancient institution or, depending on who you ask, a media-savvy operator who understood exactly how outrage fuels relevance. Tom Bauer's research paints her as no stranger to public relations long before royal life, someone who understood headlines, angles, and timing. So when she and Harry stepped away from royal duties yet stepped directly into the global spotlight, critics felt vindicated. To them, it looked less like escape and more like rebranding with a bigger platform. Then came another voice from across the Atlantic, a reality TV mogul who built her empire by saying what others only whispered. Before the Oprah interview even aired, she publicly rolled her eyes at the narrative forming around Meghan. The argument? You can't go from cable TV obscurity to palaces, titles, and a wedding watched by millions and then present yourself only as a victim of the system that elevated you. That skepticism exploded after the interview aired. For critics like her, the issue wasn't that Meghan spoke, it was how and when she spoke. Prime time, massive audience, maximum impact. If privacy was the goal, they asked, why choose the loudest possible stage? To them, it wasn't a cry for peace, it was a masterclass in staying culturally dominant. And just when the debate felt like it couldn't get more politically charged, in stepped a conservative commentator who approached the entire saga from a completely different angle. She didn't just question the media strategy, she questioned the narrative of oppression itself. Her argument was blunt. How does someone with wealth, fame, global attention, and a California mansion position themselves as powerless? That take ignited a firestorm, because now the conversation wasn't just about royal drama, it was about race, privilege, victimhood, and whether deeply serious issues were being used as shields in a public relations war. To supporters, Meghan was bravely exposing painful truths. To critics like this, she was importing American culture wars into a centuries-old monarchy and weaponizing public sympathy. And here's the twist that keeps this saga endlessly combustible. Both sides think they're defending something sacred. One side believes they're defending a woman who was chewed up by a brutal institution and an unforgiving press. The other believes they're calling out someone who studied the system, used it to rise, then torched it while cashing in on the fallout. What makes it even messier is how personal it all feels. These aren't distant commentators discussing a policy. These are people who talk like they've been personally deceived, personally offended, personally ghosted by the fairy tale they thought they were watching. And that theme, ghosting, cutting ties, sudden exits, is about to get a lot more literal. Because the next chapter in this list of enemies isn't about TV personalities or political commentators. It's about the man who shared a home, a life, and a future plan right before Prince entered the picture. And the timeline? Oh, the timeline is where things start looking less like destiny and more like overlap. Because before the palace fairy tale went public, there was another man in the picture, and according to the timeline laid out by investigators and biographers, the ending of that relationship was as abrupt as a door slamming in a silent room. Corey Vidiello wasn't a fling. He was the serious boyfriend, the live-in partner, the one friends thought might be the one. A successful chef, a stable life in Toronto, a relationship that looked grown up and grounded. But then came the London trip, the blind date, the prince. And here's where the story stops sounding like romance and starts sounding like strategy, at least to critics. Reports claim she was still living with Corey when she met Harry, still sharing a home, still in a committed relationship. Then suddenly, it was over. Clean break. No public drama, no messy interviews, just silence. Corey never trashed her in the press, never sold a story, never cashed in. He disappeared with dignity, which somehow made the contrast louder. To observers, it looked like a pattern. When the next level appears, the previous chapter closes fast. And he wasn't the only one who would later be framed as part of a trail of emotional casualties. Daytime television didn't hold back either. A certain talk show queen with a talent for saying the quiet part out loud claimed Meghan had once tried to get booked on her show long before the royal glow-up. Her commentary was sharp, almost theatrical. The underlying message? Don't act confused about attention when you've been chasing cameras for years. To her, this wasn't a woman overwhelmed by fame. This was a woman who understood exactly how fame works. That theme, you knew what you signed up for, became the backbone of nearly every major critic. Because while supporters saw a love story that spiraled into institutional pressure, critics saw someone who studied the spotlight, stepped into the brightest version of it, and then acted shocked when it burned hot. Then, the drama jumped from commentary to consequences. A co-host on a major daytime show publicly defended another outspoken critic of Meghan, and that defense detonated her own career. The debate exploded on air. Accusations flew. Words like racism and accountability collided in real time. Within weeks, the long-running job was gone. Just like that. To some, it was proof that criticism of Meghan came with social and professional risk. To others, it was long overdue accountability for toxic media culture. Either way, Meghan's orbit wasn't just creating opinions, it was creating casualties. And then there's the ex-husband story, the one that always makes people lean closer when it's told. Trevor Engelson, married, years together, shared dreams while she built her acting career. And then, according to accounts from biographers, the marriage didn't end with a fight or counseling or closure. It ended with a package. Her wedding rings mailed back, no dramatic scene, no long goodbye. Just a symbolic mic drop in a box. Friends said he was blindsided, devastated. But like Corey, Trevor didn't go on a revenge tour. He stayed quiet, which only made the narrative more mysterious. Critics added this to the pattern file: sudden severances, clean exits, emotional doors locked behind her. Supporters argued it was simply a woman outgrowing relationships that no longer fit her future. But the story doesn't stay in Hollywood. It crashes straight into politics. When a former U.S. president publicly says he's not a fan, that's not gossip, that's geopolitical shade. Meghan's past comments about him resurfaced. His comments about her followed. He accused her of disrespecting the Queen, influencing Harry away from duty, and meddling in American politics while still holding royal titles. It became less about personality and more about power. Now, she wasn't just a divisive celebrity, she was, in the eyes of critics, a political actor wrapped in royal branding. Across the ocean, the British press took things to even darker territory. One veteran TV personality wrote a column so vicious, so graphic in its language, that it triggered a record-breaking wave of complaints. The backlash was instant. The column was pulled. Apologies followed. But the damage was done. It showed just how extreme the hatred toward Meghan had become in some corners. Not just criticism, but rage. And strangely, even that fed the polarization. Supporters pointed to it as proof of cruel obsession. Critics claimed it was the ugly symptom of a public pushed past its patience. But if you want obsession, you don't have to look at columnists. You look at family. Her half-sister has built an entire public identity around denouncing her. Interviews, books, lawsuits, accusations of lies about their upbringing, claims of betrayal, claims of being erased. The lawsuit failed, but the emotional wreckage didn't disappear. Their father reportedly hasn't met his grandchildren. Siblings divided. Family fractures played out on global television. It's Shakespearean if Shakespeare had social media and cable news. And then we reach the man many consider the final boss of Meghan critics, the broadcaster who went from friendly acquaintance to relentless adversary. He says she ghosted him the night she met Harry. She says nothing. Since then, his criticism hasn't just been regular, it's been a full-time mission. He questioned her truthfulness, mocked her claims, challenged her mental health disclosures. The fallout cost him his job on live television after an explosive on-air clash. But instead of fading, he doubled down. New platforms, more interviews, more headlines. To some, he's defending free speech and calling out hypocrisy. To others, he's a man nursing a personal grudge on a global stage. And that's the thread connecting every name on this list, from exes to commentators to politicians to relatives. With Meghan, nobody feels neutral. People don't just disagree. They feel wronged, fooled, inspired, protective, furious. She doesn't just attract attention, she triggers reaction. So is she a woman who challenged an ancient system and paid the price in public blood? Or is she a master of reinvention who knew exactly how to turn conflict into currency? Maybe the truth lives in the uncomfortable middle, where ambition, love, pain, ego, and image all collide under the brightest spotlight on earth. One thing is undeniable. Fairy tale or cautionary tale, Meghan Markle didn't just enter the royal story. She rewrote the script, and half the world is still arguing about the ending.